My husband was buried on a Monday. 4 days later, I stood at my kitchen window and watched a locksmith walk straight up to my front door my stepson had sent him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up the phone and called my attorney. But what Derek never knew was that Thomas had spent 28 years quietly building something his own son could never touch, and a small brass key was about to bring all of it down. My name is Destiny Harris. I'm 67 years old, and I need to tell you what was inside a small brass key because it changed everything I thought I understood about the man I spent 31 years married to. Thomas sold commercial flooring. Not glamorous, I know, but he was good at it, and he took pride in being good at it, and I always respected that about him. I taught 3rd grade for most of our marriage, and we had a house in Asheville with a porch wrapping around 2 sides, and every October, the leaves outside that porch did things I still can't describe properly. That was our life. Nothing spectacular, just genuinely ours. What does a good marriage look like to you? Is it the big moments? Or is it more the small things, like someone always knowing which crackers you like? Thomas had 2 children from his first marriage. Pamela, the younger one, was quiet and kind and always seemed to be apologizing for something without ever saying what. Derek was 46, and I'll be honest with you, Derek had a way of looking at things other people owned and seeing possibility. I noticed it early, the way his eyes moved around a room when he thought no one was paying attention. I never pushed Thomas on it, because Thomas never invited me in. Every conversation he and Derek had seemed to have a second conversation running underneath it that I wasn't meant to hear. I told myself that was just fathers and sons sometimes. I've had 3 years now to think about how wrong I was. The morning of the funeral, Derek pulled me aside near the coat room. His voice was warm, the way certain voices are warm when someone has been practicing warmth. He said he and Pamela were worried about me rattling around alone in that big house. Said there were financial matters that needed attention soon. I told him I had an estate attorney. He said, of course, and gave me a smile that stopped well short of his eyes. 4 days later, I came back from my sister Margaret's place and found a white van in my driveway. Derek had called a locksmith to rekey the front and back doors. His reason, delivered to me over the phone in a voice of practiced patience, was that he'd found a spare key of Thomas's and was concerned about who else might have one. I told the locksmith to stop. Went inside, called my attorney, Lois Hartley, who is one of the sharpest people I have ever met in my life, and told her what was happening. She made 2 phone calls. The locksmith packed his tools and left. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed Thomas and I had shared for 3 decades, and I stared up at nothing. And I thought about that smile, about every phone call Thomas had taken in the other room, about the way he'd come home from talking to Derek sometimes, looking like something had been taken out of him quietly without ceremony and nothing put back. When someone close to you tries something like Derek did in that first moment, do you freeze? Or does something just take over and you act before you even think? 2 days after the locksmith, a man named James Calloway called. Thomas's business attorney. I'd met him twice, maybe 3 times at company dinners over the years. His voice on the phone was careful and professional, but underneath it I could hear the particular sound of a man who had been holding something heavy for a long time and was finally ready to set it down. He said he needed to see me in person, said Thomas had been very specific about the sequence of things, said there was something he needed to give me directly. I drove downtown the next morning. James had one of those offices with too many plants and not enough windows. Silver-haired, trim. He sat down across from me and without any small talk at all, told me that Thomas had maintained a private property for 28 years, a cabin up in Valle Crucis in Watauga County in the mountains northeast of Asheville, owned solely in Thomas's name. taxes paid every year from a private account. No one in the family had ever been told. Ah. I sat very still and listened to him speak. The floor did this thing, not dropping, just shifting the way it feels when you step off an escalator and the ground isn't quite where you expected. I know that feeling now. I didn't have a name for it then. James looked at me steadily and said, "Destiny, I know where your mind is going. Let me finish." He told me Thomas had left an explanation, that he had planned all of this 8 years ago, step by careful step, the way he did everything. And then James reached into his desk drawer and placed a small brass key on the surface between us. Thomas wanted me to go to the cabin first, before any lawyers got involved, before the family, before any decisions were made at all. Drive up alone, go inside, see what was there. Then James said everything would make sense. When James put that key on the table, what do you think you would have felt in that moment? Would you have wanted to go right away, or would you have needed time to sit with it first? I picked up the key. It was cold, smaller than I expected. I looked at it for longer than made sense, probably, and then I drove north. The road to Valle Crucis takes you through apple country, old orchards, farm stands, barns with the paint coming off in long curling strips. It's the kind of drive where the landscape just quietly insists you slow down. I had the radio off the whole 2 hours. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was going through every possibility, turning each one over, setting it down, picking up the next. The cabin sat back from a gravel road, dark cedar siding, low and plain, maybe 3 rooms, stone chimney, a porch facing east toward the ridge. The woodpile beside the door was freshly stacked and straight, no weeds around the front steps. Someone had been maintaining this place recently. I sat in my car for a good 15 minutes before I got out. Inside was clean and simple. Small kitchen, a sitting room with a wood stove and 2 chairs facing each other, a bedroom at the back, and in that bedroom, behind a landscape painting of a ridgeline I didn't recognize, there was a fireproof safe set into the wall. The key fit. 4 things were inside. The first was the property deed insurance papers and a letter from James confirming the cabin had been placed in a trust with me as sole beneficiary effective the moment Thomas died, structured specifically so it could not be challenged as part of the general estate. He had thought of every angle. Of course he had. The second was a USB drive in a small plastic sleeve. Written on the sleeve in Thomas's handwriting, that careful, even printing I'd know anywhere, were the words, "Watch this first. If Derek causes trouble, he will." So, I set that one aside and picked up the third thing. 8 spiral-bound notebooks, some going back nearly 20 years. I opened one somewhere in the middle and found page after page of Thomas's printing dense and steady logging dates and dollar amounts with short notes in the margins. Derek called, said he needed $15,000 to deal with a contractor problem. I gave it to him. I turned a few pages. He called again, said there'd be legal trouble over the first marriage settlement if I didn't wire $40,000. I know that's not true. I gave it to him anyway. Year after year, amount after amount, a private record no one was ever supposed to see. A man being slowly drained by someone he couldn't stop loving and writing it all down anyway. Like bearing witness was the only thing left he could control. I still don't know how he carried that alone. I've thought about it 100 times, and I still don't know. As you hear about those notebooks, does it make you angry at Thomas for staying silent? Or do you understand exactly why he did? The fourth thing was the one that undid me completely. A handwritten letter, 8 pages, my name at the top. I'm not going to read you all of it, but the part I come back to the part I've read so many times, the paper has gone soft at the fold, said this, "Destiny. I kept this place because I needed somewhere Derek could not reach. If you're reading this, I ran out of time to tell you in person, and I'm sorry for that. The silence was never about shame. It was about keeping something safe for you. Every dollar in this account is yours, earned clean and kept separate. I know you'll do the right things with the right people. I know you won't let him bully you the way he bullied me. You are braver than you know. You always were. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time with the letter in my lap. Here's what I need you to understand. I had felt something was wrong, not the scale of it, not the details, but I'd felt it in the way Thomas would come home from certain phone calls looking hollowed out. I told myself it was their history, their complicated dynamic, none of my business to push through. I trusted Thomas to carry what he said he could carry. But Thomas hadn't been letting it go quietly. He'd been building me a way out for 28 years, and he never said a single word about it. I drove home, called Lois first thing the next morning. The USB drive turned out to be a 40-minute video. Thomas at the kitchen table of that cabin, that exact table, in that exact room, looking straight into the camera, completely calm, the calm he had when he was absolutely certain of something. He went through 12 separate incidents over 15 years. Names, dates, dollar amounts, the $40,000 wire transfer, the threats about the old settlement that had been resolved decades before Derek brought it back up. He used the words financial elder abuse. Without flinching, without looking away. He had researched the term. He knew precisely what to call what had been done to him. Lois watched it with a colleague who handled elder law. Within a week, a formal complaint had been filed. Derek's attorney received a letter that made the situation very clear. Derek never came to my house again. He tried through his lawyer to arrange a meeting. I declined. There was nothing to discuss. The cabin was already mine, protected by a trust Thomas had spent years building specifically so it couldn't be touched. And those notebooks, that video, if Derek pushed any further, they would end up in proceedings that would go very badly for him. Lois communicated all of this to his attorney with a precision I found genuinely satisfying. 4 months after Thomas died, the authorities determined the evidence was sufficient to refer Derek's conduct for criminal review. I won't tell you I felt triumphant. What I felt was smaller than that and more honest, like a door finally closing on a room I'd been standing in the doorway of for too long. Pamela called once, quiet on the phone, uncertain, said she hadn't known how bad it had gotten. I believed her. I could hear it in her voice. I told her I held nothing against her, and I meant it. We'd both loved the same man as best we could from where we each stood, she cried. I didn't. By that point, my tears had already gone where they were needed most. I kept the cabin. Every October, I drive up there for a week, when the oaks along the ridge are turning gold and red, and the mornings are cold enough that you need a fire going by 6. I bring Margaret or sometimes my friend Carol, and we cook simple food and play cards and go to sleep when it gets dark. I haven't moved Thomas's things. The 2 chairs in the sitting room still face each other. I sit in mine with my coffee and watch the morning light come through the east-facing windows and lay itself out in long, warm bars across the floor, and I think about a man who spent 28 years making sure that when everything fell apart, I would still have somewhere solid to land. He built me this. Through all of it, through every drained account and every phone call that left him hollowed out, he was quietly building me this. I am not the same woman who drove up that mountain road with a key she didn't understand and dread sitting in her chest like a stone. The woman who opened that safe had spent so many years inside an ordinary good life that she'd forgotten her spine was made of something that bends but does not break. I haven't forgotten since. There is something I want to ask you before you go. Have you ever found out, after losing someone, that they had been protecting you in ways you never knew about? I'd love to hear your story in the comments because I think more of us have been quietly loved like that than we ever realize. And if someone in your life right now is carrying something heavy alone, someone who needs to hear that the people who love them are still going to be okay, share this with them today. Sometimes that's the only thing that helps.